Hello, my name is Sergio Ramirez, and I am the Associate Dean of Admissions and Student Services for the USC School of Dramatic Arts. Today, we're going to be talking about college financing for parents of artists. So let's get started. The first tip in understanding college financing is to really look at the various degree options that are available in the arts. The first is a certificate program. The certificate programs are typically offered at some colleges, but usually at conservatories or various other institutions that may focus in on the arts. These programs are typically 2 years, but are available for students to apply to directly. The next is an associate's degree. You'll typically find associate's degrees at community colleges. There are a number of different options for students to explore and understand the depth of an associate's degree. And again, these programs are typically intended for enrollment for about 2 years. The next is probably the more traditional path that some students take, which is the Bachelor of Arts. The Bachelor of Arts is, will vary program by program. So it really is important for students to kind of do their research and understand if that particular program is going to meet their desired interest and goals. These programs are usually 4 years and offered at most colleges and universities. And then in addition to the Bachelor of Arts is the Bachelor of Fine Arts. The Bachelor of Fine Arts is a conservatory style program and usually takes about 4 years. But again, this will vary school by school and is usually offered at colleges and universities. These two programs are going to be where a bulk of what this presentation will reference in terms of that 4-year academic journey. And then for students who are looking to continue on in their educational or professional training experience, they may look at one of the terminal degrees offered in the arts, which is the Master of Fine Arts. This is directed at students who are more on the performance side. And I'll explain the distinction in just a second, but these programs are typically 2 to 3 years and are at a number of different colleges and universities. And then the last is the doctorate or PhD. So we do get a number of students who express an interest in focusing more on the critical studies aspect of a particular art or profession. And this is different than what we would see in the MFA program, whereas the MFA, as I said, is more performance-based. The doctorate is going to be more research-based. So this program is going to range anywhere between 3 to 4, sometimes 5 years, depending on how long it takes for a student to do their research and write their dissertation. And again, the difference is that this is going to be the doctorate or PhD is going to be more research-based, and the MFA is going to be more performance-based. But those are the two terminal degrees that we typically find in the arts, in addition to the various options that I've also already explained. The application process is something to also consider when you're looking at financing in the arts. So the first is the actual application process, the actual application process. So the application is going to range anywhere between a free application to $100 or sometimes more. So it is going to vary school by school. But that is an expense that students and families should also be considering when they're looking at the overall cost of what this just application experience will look like. Depending on how many schools a student applies to, that cost can go up very, very quickly. In addition to that is also looking at the actual audition experience. So many schools are going to require students to do an in-person audition or audition at a certain location that they may also be joining you at, or now that we've seen these past few years, do the audition online. There are going to be various fees attached to this experience, especially if you're doing it in person or going to a remote location and meeting a school representative there. You've got to consider travel, you've got to consider hotel, you've got to consider food expenses, as well as just any other fees that are attached to that experience. But when you look at that, it's really important to understand that these are additional fees to add to just the actual application. And it's going to be very different than maybe a traditional or more science-based or social science-based student because of the nature at which we do our recruitment and our admissions in the various art schools. Financing higher education. So when we look at financing, most of the information that schools are gonna collect is gonna be via the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This is a government application that every student pretty much completes in order for a school to understand family's financial profile. There are some schools that are going to require the CSS profile. Now, this is usually at a private school, so not everyone will need to complete this, but it is something that students will be expected to complete. When we get that information, we then start creating a package for students based on using a number of different funding sources. So the first is looking at state grants that a student's eligible for. In California, students may be eligible for a Cal Grant, which based on a student's income or family's income, they may be eligible for. Then there are also federal grants. So there is the Pell Grant, which is similar to the Cal Grant, but it is a federal program that is helped to offset the cost of higher education. And again, is for students who fall within a certain financial income. There's also institutional aid. Now, this is probably something that you're going to see that's very common. There's a lot of schools that offer aid directly from the school through various resources and extend that to students. And then there's loans. So that again is used to help kind of put a package together for students. Now, the distinction between the state grants, federal grants, and institutional aid is that aid is typically something that you do not have to repay back. When we get to something that you do have to repay back, that is going to be where you're going to find loans. So the loans typically do have to be paid back, and there are various ways in which students can pay that back. It's not in some cases it is immediate, that you're paying for it as you go. In some cases, especially if you're getting a federal loan, usually they wait until after you've finished your educational experience, and then they start expecting you to pay. So those are going to vary. And then the last is just income-based awards. So awards that are extended based on a family's income. Now, what's important to understand in this process is really the expected family contribution. So I've put a description there from the studentaid.gov website, but it is important that when we talk about student aid, you are going to hear this over and over again when you start to receive award packages. And you'll also get information when you start to fill out your FAFSA and maybe your CSS profile, where they talk about what is your expected family contribution. It is important to understand that everyone is some schools have various philosophies in terms of education. Some schools, if you meet a certain threshold, you don't have to pay. They'll extend a scholarship to cover the tuition, but there may be other expenses that you may have to cover. Some schools will give you a full scholarship. Some schools will, again, look at your income and determine what that family contribution is, and then put together a package based on all of that information and what resources they are able to extend. So it's really, really important to understand that, looking at this and understanding the family contribution is going to be really key, but it's going to vary school by school. But to give you a sense of a sample package, I've put together just a package from one of our students. So here at USC, we are a private school. Tuition is roughly around $60,000. And that also we would add the fees, room and board, books and supplies, personal miscellaneous, and then transportation fees. So the total cost of tuition and fees is about $81,617 here at USC. Now, a typical, or not a typical, but a package extended to a student that I pulled is reflected here. So in this case, we see that a student was eligible for a federal Pell Grant, which is some of that aid that I had mentioned offered through the federal government, a scholarship that was extended. There are loans in here. There is federal work study. Work study is money that is packaged, and students then have to find a job, usually on campus, that has work study, and then use those funds towards the overall cost of their education, and then a university grant. And again, this is the institutional aid that I had mentioned earlier. Now, you'll see here in this particular example, there is a small gap. Now, in this particular case, that would be what is the expected family contribution. That amount is going to vary family by family. So it really is important. Sometimes it's a couple $100, sometimes it's thousands of dollars. But you will receive information from every school that you apply to, and that you follow their particular application process, and then be extended information in terms of what kind of aid they are able to extend to you if you follow all of those steps in regards to applying for aid. So just understand that this is really key when you look at the difference between what you see as the cost of education towards what you actually may get as an award from that particular institution. This is a really important website to also kind of dig a little deeper into that, maybe do a little planning in advance, which is the net price calculator website offered through the federal government. So this is a resource where you can go on, find a number of schools, put that school information, and then you will be sent over to the page where the net price calculator for that school is. Every school that receives federal money does have to have a net price calculator to give families some initial sense of what to expect in terms of aid by when you put in certain information into that calculator. So you may put in your family size, income, some assets, things like that, and they will give you a very, very rough idea of what that aid could look like at that institution. Again, it's just an estimate. The actual award is going to look very different, but it is based on their models that they use as they create the packages for financial support. So it's really important. This is a great resource for students to have and understand. But with that, I hope you found this information helpful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Take care. Best of luck to you in the process. And as we say at USC, fight on. Bye-bye.